Hello and welcome. So today we're going to embark on an in-depth exploration of Homer and the Homeric tradition, a journey that will take us through the annals of ancient Greek culture, literature, and the profound impact these works have had on Western civilization. Homer, the legendary Greek author, is traditionally credited with the composition of the Iliad and the Odyssey. These epic poems are not only literary masterpieces, but also pivotal cultural artifacts that have shaped our understanding of heroism, human nature, and the divine. Despite the mystery surrounding Homer's life, his work continues to inspire and influence various facets of our society. The Iliad and the Odyssey have transcended their historical origins to become timeless narratives that resonate with universal themes and values. So today we're going to have a look at some key areas to understand the breadth and indeed the depth of Homer's legacy. So we'll begin by situating Homer in the early Archaic period of ancient Greece, exploring the cultural and historical backdrop that gave rise to his epic poetry. Then we'll delve into the intriguing tradition that Homer was blind, examining the symbolic significance of this notion and its implications for understanding his works. After that, we will discuss the various cities that claimed Homer as their native son, reflecting on the mythologization of his identity and the cultural prestige associated with being linked to his legacy. After that, we'll conduct a fairly in-depth analysis of Homer's two monumental works, exploring their themes, narrative structures, and the enduring characters that populate these epics. After we've looked at the Iliad and the Odyssey, we will examine the oral tradition in which Homer's epics are believed to have originated, discussing the role of rhapsodies and the importance of the oral formulaic composition in preserving these stories. And then we're going to have a little look at and indeed play around with one of the most hotly debated topics in all of classical studies, which is exploring, what we call the Homeric question. So we're going to explore the various arguments and evidence regarding whether the Iliad and the Odyssey were the work of a single poet or a collective tradition. And then finally we will assess Homer's profound influence on literature, philosophy, education, the arts, language, modern popular culture, illustrating how his works have shaped and indeed continue to shape Western civilization. Homer's significance in Western culture really cannot be overstated. I mean that in the most literal of senses. His epics have provided a foundation for much of Western literary tradition and have been central to the educational curricula of ancient Greece, Rome, and beyond. These works are not merely stories of adventure and heroism. They are complex narratives that explore fundamental aspects of human existence, including things like honor, fate, suffering, and the relationship between mortals and the divine. The Iliad and the Odyssey have been subjects for scholarly study for, centuries. Each generation brings new interpretations and insights. The Iliad, with its focus on the wrath of Achilles and the tragedy of the Trojan War, and the Odyssey, with its epic journey of Odysseus back to Ithaca, offer rich tapestries of narrative, character, and theme that continue to captivate readers and scholars alike. So let's look at the historical context. So Homer is traditionally he is situated in the early Archaic period of ancient Greece, which is approximately the 8th to 7th centuries BCE. This era followed the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization and the subsequent Dark Ages that Greece experienced. A period that was marked by a significant decline in both population and literacy. During the Archaic period, the culture of ancient Greece was undergoing significant transformations, including the re-emergence of literacy, development of city-states, and the establishment of Greek mythology and epic poetry traditions. The Archaic period was a time of renewed cultural and indeed artistic flourishing. The invention of the Greek alphabet played a crucial role in this cultural renaissance or revival. This new writing system facilitated the recording of the oral traditions and the creation of literary texts. It was within this context of cultural renewal and literary activity that Homer's epics are believed to have been composed. Despite the lack of concrete evidence about Homer's life, his works reflect the values, social structures, and mythologies of this formative period in Greek history. The Iliad and the Odyssey not only recount heroic tales, but also provide insights into the societal norms, religious beliefs, and moral values of the time. The early Archaic period also saw the establishment of major religious sanctuaries and the development of monumental architecture, such as the temples dedicated to the gods, like, for example, the temple at Delphi and so on. The burgeoning city-state became the central unit of Greek political and social life. Within this milieu, the epic poems attributed to Homer played a significant role in shaping what we now consider to be the Greek identity and cultural values. The Iliad and the Odyssey served as more than just entertainment. They were didactic tools that conveyed lessons about heroism, honour, and the human condition. They also reinforced the importance of the gods and the belief in divine intervention in human affairs. The heroes of these epics, while possessing extraordinary abilities, were also subject to the whims of the gods and the constraints of fate, reflecting the ancient Greek worldview. In summary, or more to the point, understanding the historical context of the early Archaic period provides us with a foundation for appreciating the significance of Homer's epics. These works emerged from a time of profound cultural transformation and played a crucial role in shaping Greek identity and values. Because of this period, this Greek Dark Ages, not a great deal is known about what happened in that time, especially when you get down to the level of like individuals and culture and society and so on, because there was such a rapid and profound decline in literacy in that time. There are no real sort of records available from that time. So this sort of Greek cultural transformation and revitalization is in many senses the sort of beginnings of what we now understand as modern Western culture. So now that we've looked at the historical context, it is worth delving into what we describe as the blind poet tradition. Now, I love that. I think it's such a visual sort of, no pun intended, but really quite a visual description, and there is quite a again, no pun intended, but there is a profound poetic notion buried within that. So let's have a look at the blind poet tradition. So one of the most intriguing aspects of, in my opinion at least, of Homer's legacy is this idea, this tradition that he was blind. This notion is primarily derived from later classical sources and lacks any actual contemporary collaboration. The idea of the blind poet might be symbolic, associating blindness with the heightened poetic and prophetic insight, a motif seen in various cultures around the world, including the figure of the blind seer, what was his name? Tiresias in Greek mythology, and the similar traditions in other cultures. So in the Odyssey, Homer described the blind bard Demodocus, who sings of the Trojan War. So sang the famous bard, and Odysseus was moved to tears, his cheeks wet with weeping. Now that comes from the Odyssey, from Book 8. Now, just a quick aside about the books of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Really, that refers to each book was the length of a standard scroll, essentially. So that was a later tradition that was sort of brought to bear, as it were. And the sort of book, the way that we've got it, book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, they are, in terms of the actual content, they are meaningless, totally meaningless. They are just useful ways for us to describe where it comes from within that tradition, in a way that makes it easier for us to write about and talk about. But don't get hung up on chapter and verse or book in this instance, because they are arbitrary and essentially meaningless. So yeah, that quote, I'll just go back over it because I went off on a bit of a red herring there. So that quote: "So sang the famous bard, and Odysseus was moved to tears, his cheeks wet with weeping." This portrayal might serve as a self-referential nod, although that remains speculative. The motif of the blind poet underscores the reverence and mystery surrounding Homer in ancient Greek culture. The association of blindness with poetic talent suggests that Homer's contemporaries and later audiences may have viewed his works as divinely inspired, transcending ordinary human capabilities. The tradition of the blind poet also aligns with the ancient Greek belief in the Muses, the goddesses of inspiration for literature, science, and the arts. By depicting Homer as blind, ancient sources may have been emphasizing his direct connection to the divine, not define, suggesting that his extraordinary poetic talents were a gift from the Muses. This motif of the blind poet appears in other cultural traditions as well. In many ancient societies, blindness was often linked to inner vision and spiritual insight. For instance, in ancient Israel, the prophet Samuel was depicted as having limited physical sight but great spiritual vision. Similarly, in Norse tradition, the god Odin sacrifices an eye to gain wisdom. These parallels suggest a broader cultural association between physical blindness and heightened inner perception. Moreover, the tradition of the blind poet reflects the oral nature of Homer's works. In an oral culture, the emphasis was on auditory and mnemonic skills rather than visual ones. The blind poet, relying entirely on memory and auditory cues, would exemplify the oral tradition's strengths in preserving and transmitting stories through generations. In conclusion, the the tradition of Homer as a blind poet adds a layer of symbolic meaning to his legacy. It reflects the ancient beliefs about the nature of poetic inspiration, and indeed the value placed on auditory and mnemonic skills in oral cultures. Whether or not Homer was actually blind, this tradition underscores the reverence in which he was held and the enduring impact of his works. So now let's have a look at Homer's birthplace, because it's something that is, or in the ancient world, was quite hotly debated. Lots of city-states, including Chios, Smyrna, and Ios, claimed Homer as their native son. This rivalry highlights Homer's significant cultural impact and the widespread desire to be associated with his legacy. Chios and Smyrna are the most frequently mentioned contenders, with the Homeridae, a guild of what they call rhapsodies in Chios, asserting lineage from Homer. These claims reflect the prestige associated with being linked to Homer and the cultural capital that such an association could confer upon a city. The exact birthplace of Homer remains a mystery, and in my opinion will forever remain a mystery. And this sort of uncertainty, this mystery, reflects the mythologization of Homer's identity over time. The ambiguity adds to the mystique of Homer as both a historical and a symbolic figure. The various claims about his birthplace also may include the wide geographical spread of the oral tradition in which his works were composed and transmitted. Each city's claim can be seen as like a testament to the far-reaching influence of Homer's epics around the world, or certainly around the Greek world. The claims of different cities may also reflect the itinerant nature of rhapsodies, who travelled from place to place reciting epic poetry. This tradition of itinerant poets could well explain the widespread claims of Homer's origin, because these poets would have carried his stories to the various parts of the Greek world, but when they recite those stories, they would have embedded them deeply within the sort of local cultural identities, perhaps as in an effort to make it relatable to the audience, but nonetheless, because these stories were recited in all of these places, but the the recitation was then sort of embedded deeply into the local cultural values and identity. So each of those cities felt like they were birthing Homer into the world. Chios, in particular, has of all the city-states, has a strong claim to the Homeric heritage. The Homeridae, a guild of rhapsodies on the island, claimed to be direct descendants of Homer, and were responsible for preserving and performing his works. The existence of this guild suggests that Homeric poetry was not only a literary tradition, but also a familial and a communal one, with specific groups taking on the role of custodians of Homer's legacy. Smyrna, another claimant, was an important cultural and commercial centre in the ancient Greek world. Its strategic location and vibrant cultural life would have made it a likely hub for the transmission and performance of epic poetry. The city's claim to Homer's birthplace is supported by its rich tradition of artistic and literary patronage. Ios, although less prominent than Chios and Smyrna, also claimed Homer as its native son. According to their local traditions, Homer died and indeed was buried on the island, further enhancing its association with the poet. These claims underscore the wide geographical distribution of the Homeric traditions, as well as the diverse ways in which different communities sought to connect themselves to Homer's legacy. So in conclusion, the various claims to Homer's birthplace reflect the widespread influence of his works and the cultural prestige associated with being linked to his legacy. These claims also highlight the itinerant nature of the oral tradition and also the deep-rooted cultural significance of Homeric poetry across the Greek world. Now, the thing with Homer's birthplace is that whether or not he was actually born in any of those cities is not in itself a particularly significant question. It's not an answer that really changes anything. What really matters is the claims these cities have made and the impact that claim and the Homeric tradition has had on the development of that city politically, socially and culturally. So now let's turn to Homer's two monumental works, the Iliad and the Odyssey. We will start with the Iliad because it comes first, and then we'll move on to the Odyssey. So, as I said, we're going to start with the Iliad. The Iliad was set during the Trojan War, and it centers around the Greek hero Achilles, and more specifically his wrath and its consequences. The poem explores the themes of heroism, morality, and the human condition. So here's a famous passage that I believe illustrates Achilles' profound rage. Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles, son of Peleus, that brought countless ills upon the Arcanians. And I believe I just mispronounced that. I think I just said Arcanians, but it's actually Archaeans. So maybe I should do that again. I think that would be best. Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles' son, Peleus, that brought countless ills upon the Archaeans. The Iliad blends historical elements with the mythology of the time, presenting a rich tapestry of heroism, honour, and indeed, and perhaps most importantly, the tragic costs of war. This poem opens with a quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon. Now, Achilles is our hero in this story, but Agamemnon is the leader of the Greek forces, and their quarrel is over a captive woman. And the conflict between Achilles and Agamemnon leads Achilles to the decision to withdraw from the battle, a decision that has dire consequences for the Greek army and indeed for Achilles himself. The Iliad is renowned for its vivid and poignant characterizations. Achilles, the mightiest Greek warrior, embodies both the heroic ideal and the tragic flaws of humanity. His wrath and indeed eventual reconciliation with his humanity through his encounter with Priam, the Trojan king, who comes to beg for the body of his slain son Hector, is a powerful exploration of grief and forgiveness. Before I get to the quote, I just want to touch on this point about coming to beg for the body of his son. So in this period, it was the norm, as it were, for the bodies to be brought home, and treated with some measure of reverence. So it was seen as, in some ways at least, a moral crime to just leave the dead where they fell, and to not honour them, essentially. So now let's dive into the quote. And Achilles, deeply moved, wept for his own father, as well as for Patroclus. Oh, I messed that up. I'll start that again. Sorry, I'm so bad at names, especially Greek ones. Oh, they get me all tongue-tied. So I'll start again. And Achilles, deeply moved, and wept for his own father, as well as Patroclus. The sound of their lamentation filled the hut. And that comes from book 24 of the Iliad. So the themes of fate and morality are central to the Iliad. The characters are constantly aware of their morality and also the whims of fate, as reflected by Achilles' reflections on his own impending death. My mother, Thetis, tells me that there are two ways in which I may meet my end. If I stay here and fight, I shall not return alive, but my name will live forever. Whereas if I go home, my name will die, but it will be long. Death shall take me. So, Achilles in the Iliad is one of the few characters in fact in all of Greek mythology that is aware of how he's going to die, and actually given options, given a choice. So in the Iliad, Achilles really focuses on heroism. He wants to gain immortality through being known forever, although within the Odyssey, when Odysseus travels through the underworld, he meets the essentially like the ghost of Achilles, who has he does a bit of a 180, and he kind of regrets his decision to delve into heroism and immortality, and kind of wishes that he could have lived for a really long time and been essentially immortal through his lineage, his patronage. So now we've done a bit of a look at the Iliad. We're going to delve into the Odyssey. Now, as I believe I said before, but I'll repeat it in case I didn't. This look at the Iliad and then this look at the Odyssey, although in the context of what we're discussing for this video, this lecture, they are relatively in depth. There is so much more that could be said about both the Iliad and the Odyssey that each of them is really deserving of an entire series of lectures, and no single lecture could ever really do either text any real justice. So yeah, let's have a little a peek, shall we say, at the Odyssey. So the Odyssey, it comes after the Iliad, and it follows the perilous journey of Odysseus as he travels home to Ithaca after the fall of Troy. And the Odyssey really tries to emphasize themes such as cunning, perseverance, and also the yearning for home. Odysseus' resourcefulness is evident in his encounter with Cyclops, with the Cyclops, Polyphemus. My name is nobody, mother, father, and friends. Everybody calls me nobody. And that was from the Odyssey, Book 9. So the episodic structure of the Odyssey showcases a diverse array of characters and adventures, from the enchanting Circe to the loyal Penelope. Unlike the Iliad, which is more linear and focused on a single episode of the Trojan War, the Odyssey weaves a complex narrative of Odysseus' long and adventurous journey. Odysseus' character is defined by his intelligence and cunning, often referred to as metis in Greek. His ability to outwit his enemies and navigate the challenges posed by gods and monsters alike highlights the value placed on intellect and strategic thinking in Greek culture. Tell me, Muse, of that man who, so ready at need, who wandered far and wide after he had sacked the sacred citadel of Troy. That's from the first book of the Odyssey. The Odyssey also explores the theme of loyalty and fidelity through the character of Penelope, who waits 20 years for Odysseus' return, fending off numerous suitors and maintaining hope against all odds. Penelope's faithfulness and cleverness mirror Odysseus' own qualities, highlighting the complementary nature of their relationship. And so Odysseus, with the help of Athena and his own cunning, endured all the trials of his journey and returned home to his faithful Penelope, who had awaited him with unwavering hope. And that comes from Book 23 of the Odyssey. The Odyssey also delves into the theme of hospitality, a crucial aspect of ancient Greek culture. And in fact, it was a crucial aspect of many ancient cultures, including the Scandinavian Norse cultures. So, on his journey, Odysseus encounters various hosts, both hospitable and hostile. And these interactions underscore the cultural importance of treating guests with respect and generosity. So, to summarise, the Iliad and the Odyssey are monumental works that explore fundamental experiences and values. The Iliad focuses on themes of heroism, fate, and morality, while the Odyssey emphasises intelligence, perseverance, and the importance of home. Something that I think is still relevant today and a sort of essential feature of modern culture too. Together, these epics provide a comprehensive picture of ancient Greek culture, and they continue to resonate with contemporary audiences because, as I said, notions of intelligence, perseverance, and the importance of home are still every bit as relevant now as they have ever been. So now we can begin the our brief look at the aspect of oral tradition. So Homer's epics are believed to have originated in oral tradition, where poets known as rhapsodies recited long narratives from memory using repetitive and formulaic expressions. This oral tradition was crucial in preserving these stories across generations until they were eventually transcribed. This process is evident in the repetitive epithets and the formulaic phrases characteristic of Homeric poetry, such as a swift-footed Achilles and rosy-fingered dawn. These what's the word I'm looking for? These mnemonic devices aided both memorization and performance, allowing the rhapsodies to maintain the flow and the rhythm of the narrative during lengthy recitations. The oral tradition also allowed for a hang on a minute. Sorry. So I just want to add a little bit of context. When I say lengthy recitations, both the Iliad and the Odyssey really were designed to be recited over the course of a weekend. So this poet, this rhapsody, has to be able to continue that recitation each day of the weekend. So it really is, I mean, it was for like parties, it was for gatherings and sort of, you know, important events, but it was, when I say lengthy recitation, I really do mean lengthy. So the oral tradition also allowed for a degree of flexibility and adaptation. So that meant each performance could vary slightly, with the rhapsody adjusting the narrative to suit the audience and context. This fluidity is a hallmark of oral cultures, where storytelling is a living, evolving art form rather than a fixed text. Milman Parry's research in the early 20th century on the oral formulaic composition of the epic poetry provided quite significant insights into this tradition. Parry's work demonstrated that the repetitive and formulaic nature of Homeric verse is characteristic of oral traditions, supporting the idea that the epics were products of long oral tradition rather than the work of a single individual. Parry's analysis of the Homeric question revealed that the use of fixed phrases and epithets was not a sign of artistic limitation, but rather a sophisticated technique for oral composition. These formulas allowed the poet to compose and perform lengthy and complex narratives with exceedingly remarkable consistency and coherence. Albert Lord expanded on Parry's work, studying living oral traditions in the Balkans. Lord's research showed that the principles of oral composition observed in Homeric poetry were still in practice amongst contemporary oral poets. This comparative approach provided further evidence to support the claim that the Iliad and the Odyssey likely evolved through the contributions of many oral poets over time. The oral tradition also highlights the communal nature of storytelling in ancient Greece, and indeed anywhere where the oral tradition is found, which, funnily enough, is basically everywhere. The rhapsodies who performed these epics were not merely entertainers. They were the custodians, if you will, of cultural memory, preserving and transmitting the collective history and indeed the values of their society. The performances of Homeric poetry were often public events, bringing communities together to share in the retelling of their heroic past. In conclusion, or to conclude this part about the oral tradition at least, the oral tradition played a crucial role in the composition, preservation, and indeed the transmission of Homer's epics. The repetitive and formulaic nature of the poetry reflects the sophisticated techniques of oral composition, allowing for flexibility and adaptation while maintaining the consistency and coherence. The communal aspect of oral storytelling underscores the cultural significance of these epics in ancient Greek society And on a sort of a broader level, I would say that the communal aspects of oral storytelling also underscore the importance that storytelling has for us, the human species, and how it binds us together. So, I have mentioned what we describe as the Homeric question, which really is a debate around authorship. So in fact, it is one of the most debated topics in classical studies, and this debate is really several related debates that are all sort of under the same umbrella. So we have the single author versus multiple author debate. Did one person named Homer compose both the Iliad and the Odyssey? Or were these works the results of multiple authors and, more importantly, multiple generations of oral poets? We have the debate around the nature of composition. So were these epics originally composed in writing, or were they orally composed and transmitted before being written down at a later date? We have the debate about the historical context. So what were the historical and cultural conditions under which these epics were composed and transmitted? In the early 20th century, Milman Parry's research on the oral formulaic composition of epic poetry suggested that I know I've touched on this already, but nonetheless, suggested that the repetitive and formulaic nature of Homeric verse is a characteristic of oral traditions. This supported the idea that the epics were products of a long and ancient oral tradition rather than the work of a single individual or author. Albert Lord, as I mentioned before, expanded on Parry's work, studying the living oral traditions in the Balkans, which further reinforced this view that Parry brought to the table. Modern textual analysis and also linguistic studies continue to highlight the composite nature of the texts, suggesting multiple layers of authorship and editorial intervention. The Homeric question remains a rich field of scholarly inquiry, with ongoing debates about the origins, transmission, and compilation of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Some scholars argue for a single brilliant poet whose works were preserved and transmitted through the generations, while others suggest that these epics involve a more of a collective contribution made by many poets over time. The argument for a single author often points to the thematic coherence and the the stylistic unity of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Proponents argue that the sophisticated use of language, narrative techniques, and the poetic devices indicate a singular creative vision. The consistent portrayal of characters and themes suggests a unified authorship rather than a patchwork of different contributions. On the other hand, the argument for multiple authors is supported by the evidence of oral tradition and variability of the texts. The epics show signs of being edited and compiled from different sources, with variations in dialects and in formulaic expressions. This suggests a complex history of transmission and compilation, with multiple layers of authorship and editorial intervention. The Homeric question also encompasses debates about the historical context in which the epics were composed. Um, scholars are scholars explore the social, political, and cultural conditions of the early archaic period of understanding to understand rather the origins and development of Homeric poetry. So the epics reflect a blend of Mycenaean and later Greek elements, indicating a long process of evolution and adaptation. In conclusion, the Homeric question remains an open and dynamic field of study, with ongoing debates about the authorship, composition, and transmission of the Iliad and the Odyssey, whether these works were the product of a single genius poet or a collective tradition of oral poets. They represent monumental achievements in both storytelling and literary artistry. For anybody who's wondering where I fall on the Homeric question, I lean towards the multiple authors. So my own feeling, I guess, is the best way to put it on the matter, is that it is like it's at least appears to me that the overall narrative has been composed over time. I would say more so in the Odyssey as well, because of the sort of the less sort of linear nature of its structure. But I would say that the versions that we have now, they were likely to have been written down by a single person. So I think that would have added to the sort of overall cohesion of the work. But I do believe the multiple authors through that oral tradition is the approach that, to me at least, makes the most sense. So now we've looked at the Homeric question, which is a question that warrants a series of lectures on its own. We're going to look at something else that could probably warrant a series of lectures on its own as well. We're going to have a look at the influence on literature and culture. So, despite the mystery and uncertainty surrounding Homer as an individual, surrounding his life, his works remain monumental in classical literature. They offer insight into ancient Greek culture, values, and storytelling traditions. So let's examine how the influence of Homer and the Homeric tradition. So let's look at the influence of the Homeric tradition as it permeates various aspects of Western culture and society. So let's start with literature. Homer established the conventions of epic poetry, influencing later poets like Virgil, Dante, and Milton. His narrative techniques, such as medias res, flashbacks, and detailed character development, have shaped Western narrative structures. Themes such as heroism, fate, and honor in his works have influenced Western literary themes, and characters like Achilles and Odysseus have become archetypes representing braveness and cleverness. For example, Virgil's Iliad draws heavily on Homeric themes and indeed narrative structures. The epic hero Aeneas exhibits qualities reminiscent of both Achilles and Odysseus, blending martial powers with like piety and cunning. Dante's what was it called? Divine Comedy. Dante's Divine Comedy also echoes Homeric influences, with Dante often drawing parallels between his own journey and the epic quests of Homer's heroes. So now let's briefly look on Homer's influence on philosophy and thought. So Homer's works pose fundamental moral and ethical questions about heroism, justice, and human suffering, which have been central to Western philosophy. His focus on human experiences and emotions contributed to the development of humanism in Western thought. The portrayal of gods with human-like traits also influenced the anthropocentric worldview of later Western cultures. Plato and Aristotle frequently referenced Homer in their philosophical writings, using his epics to illustrate various ethical and metaphysical concepts. Homer's exploration of fate and free will, as seen in the struggles of his characters, provided fertile grounds for philosophical debate. For instance, Achilles' internal conflict between his personal desires and his destiny as a warrior raises questions about the nature of heroism and the human condition. So let's now have a sort of a brief stopover when looking at the influence, Homer's influence on education, especially here in the Western world. Homer's epics were central to the education systems of Greece and Rome. Studying the Iliad and the Odyssey was essential for understanding language, rhetoric, and modern moral philosophy. This tradition continued through the Renaissance into modern classical education, influencing the art of oratory and public speaking in Western traditions. In ancient Greece, students would memorize and recite passages from Homer, honing their rhetorical skills and gaining a deeper appreciation for the richness of the Greek language. This practice extended to Rome, where figures like Cicero emphasized the importance of Homer in rhetorical training. During the Renaissance, humanists revived the study of Homer, integrating his works into the curriculum of the European universities. It wasn't just philosophy and literature and education that Homer influenced. In fact, the thing that Homer has, at least in my opinion, has had the most influence on is culture and the arts. Homer's epics have inspired countless works of visual art, from ancient Greek pottery and sculpture to Renaissance paintings and even modern movies. Iconic scenes from the Iliad and the Odyssey, such as Achilles' battle with Hector, or Odysseus's encounter with the Cyclops, have been depicted in various art forms. In visual arts, the dramatic and the emotional content of Homer's stories have inspired numerous works. For instance, the Renaissance painter Raphael fresco. The School of Athens includes a depiction of Homer, symbolizing the continuity of classical wisdom. In modern times, filmmakers like the Coen brothers have adapted Homeric themes in their movies, such as "O Brother, Where Art Thou," which is, although it may not actually appear on the surface, is a loose and extremely modern retelling of the Odyssey. Or we have some more sort of direct adaptations, like the movie Troy, in which Brad Pitt played Achilles. So we're going to move on from the arts and the artistic and cultural impact of Homer, and we're going to look at the impact on language and expressions. So many expressions in Western languages originate from the Homeric epics. Phrases like Achilles' heel and Trojan horse are directly derived from the Iliad and the Odyssey. Also, many names and terms in Western culture are derived from Homeric characters and places. For example, the term mentor comes from the character Mentor in the Odyssey, who acts as a guide and advisor to Telemachus. These expressions and indeed names have permeated Western languages, reflecting the deep cultural impact of Homer's works. Homer's epics, in modern literature and popular culture, Homer's epics have been adapted into numerous modern films, novels, TV series, works like James Joyce's Ulysses and the Coen brothers movie that I mentioned a minute ago, O Brother, Where Art Thou? If you haven't seen it, great movie. These are some notable modern adaptations. References to Homeric characters and themes are pervasive in Western culture, underscoring the enduring relevance of his works. James Joyce's Ulysses is a modernist reimagining of the Odyssey, set in Dublin and paralleling the adventures paralleling the adventures of Odysseus with the experiences of Leopold Bloom. The Coen brothers film O Brother, Where Art Thou? Similarly adapts the Odyssey into a 1930s American setting, blending the Homeric themes with Southern folklore. Homer's exploration of human motivations, emotions, and also relationships provide valuable insights into human nature, analysed by psychologists and sociologists. His works reflect the social, political, and cultural values of ancient Greece, offering a historical context that informs the understanding of Western civilization's origins. Freud and Jung also, they both drew on Homeric themes in their psychological theories. Freud's concept of the Oedipus complex, got there in the end, for example, relates to the archetypal struggles depicted in Greek myths. Carl Jung's exploration of the hero's journey as a fundamental psychological pattern also finds resonance in Homer's narratives. The Odyssey, in its time, the Odyssey and the Iliad have inspired scientific thought and also exploration. So the Odyssey inspired interest in geography and exploration. So scholars over the years, I mean lots of them over the years, have attempted to trace the journey of Odysseus, which contributed to the historical geography and archaeology. Homeric epics have also influenced the naming of celestial bodies and like features in astronomy. Astronomers have named numerous celestial objects after characters from Homer's epics, such as the moons of Jupiter named after Zeus's lovers, and the asteroid 1143 Odysseus. These names reflect the enduring legacy of Homer's storytelling in the scientific community. So in conclusion, because I realise that we've been at this for about an hour now, and you are probably, well, hopefully not, but quite likely extremely bored with listening to the sound of my voice. So we'll wrap it up. So in conclusion, whether Homer was a real person or a symbolic representation of the the tradition of oral poets, the Iliad and the Odyssey serve as stand as like monumental achievements in storytelling. These works embody the collective cultural memory and the literary artistry. I can't speak today. The literary artistry of ancient Greece, and have had a quite frankly undeniable impact on Western culture and literature. So Homer's influence has permeated virtually every aspect of Western society, reflecting the timeless appeal and profound impact of his storytelling and the thematic explorations. So, thank you for listening to me rattle on about Homer and the Homeric traditions. This has been a relatively in-depth exploration of the Homeric traditions, but at the same time it only really scratches the surface. There is so much more to this. In fact, there is entire fields of study devoted to this. So it is something I will come back to in the future. I will make more videos about some of the more sort of nuanced points and so on. I also plan, I don't know when, but at some point in the future I plan to do separate studies of the Iliad and the Odyssey. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, I would really enjoy the opportunity to answer them. So please jump in the bit underneath, what's it called, the comments with your questions, and I will do my level best to answer those questions. Also, if throughout I have butchered the pronunciation of any names, which I am absolutely certain that I have, jump in the comments and let me know, because a lot of these names are, well, all of these names that I've butchered today, they're Greek names, right? So I am fairly confident that I have mispronounced them. So if you could jump in the comments with like corrections on pronunciations, that would be extremely helpful to me. And it would also prevent me, hopefully at least, from making myself look like a silly sausage in the future by continuing to mispronounce things. So, so yeah, that has been an exploration and indeed explanation of Homer and the Homeric traditions. So I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found something in there that you didn't know before. And if there is something that you feel that I have missed that should have been included in this talk, then please jump in the comments and let me know. But until next time, take care.